Ezekiel Elliott, a bright star in an otherwise dim Cowboys organization. Or at least he was. 2020 showed us a very different Elliott. Was this just due to a year of misfortunes? Or is this a sign of something else? This has been one tough season for Ezekiel Elliott, plain and simple. So much so that people are starting to wonder what happened to the perennial Pro Bowler. We're talking about a guy who since entering the league has been on the short list of best players in the league. I mean, it goes deeper than that, really. Ezekiel Elliott has been a fixture on the football field and our TV screens ever since his breathtaking performances during the college football playoffs for Ohio State. He really started to enter the national consciousness following Ohio State's 42-20 victory over Oregon. Elliott ran 36 times for 246 yards, breaking a national championship record stretching back a decade, averaging a ridiculous 6.8 yards per carry and punching in 4 touchdowns along the way to an easy victory. That performance capped off an amazing stretch run to an equally impressive season, and his showing in the national championship game gave Elliott 3 consecutive games with more than 220 yards on the ground, all for a total off of 696 yards against the likes of Wisconsin, Alabama, and Oregon. Is that good? I feel like that's good. Anyway, those performances were impressive enough for the Dallas Cowboys to go against popular opinion and take a high first-round pick, 4th overall to be exact, on Elliott. And for the most part, Zeke has not disappointed at all. You can argue about the value of a running back until the cows come home, but in Zeke's case, the numbers make a pretty strong case that he is an exception to the rule. I mean, think about it. Through his first 4 seasons in the NFL, he led the league in rushing twice, earning 1 All-Pro selection his rookie year and 3 Pro Bowl trips. In fact, the only year he failed to earn any league-wide accolades was 2017, when he only played 10 games due to a suspension. And he still almost rushed for 1,000 yards that year. Again, pretty good. Needless to say, Ezekiel Elliott has had a very promising start to his professional career. At least, it looked that way before his most recent campaign in 2020, when he, along with the rest of his Dallas Cowboy teammates, have been a sore disappointment. And Elliott in particular has completely fallen off a cliff, at least to the absurd standard that he set for himself during those first few seasons. The fact of the matter is that the 2020-2021 season is undeniably the single worst season of his entire career. By far. In 15 total games played, he rushed for 979 yards, a lower total than he put forth during his 10-game season in 2017. Not to mention that he only averaged 4 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns, both of which were the lowest totals of his career. Oh, and he ended up fumbling the ball a career worst 6 times. Needless to say, the 2020-2021 season is the one that Ezekiel Elliott will want to forget. Now, the real question is, will Ezekiel Elliott ever regain his All-Pro form, or even his Pro Bowl form? Or should we now expect this watered-down version of the man who, even with this brutal season added in, has averaged over 1,200 yards and 10 total touchdowns per season? If you ask Zeke himself, he hasn't paid a second thought to any of it. He explained this to the Dallas Morning News. "Do I feel like I'm underappreciated? No, not at all," Elliott said. "I said it before. I don't really worry. I don't worry about what's going on outside this locker room, because really, that doesn't matter. All that matters is my teammates and my coaches and ownership, and they've been supportive of me all year. It has been a rough one, but I mean, just had to grind it out and we ended up short. But we'll be back stronger next year for sure." And all in all, he remained fairly constant in his stance on everything throughout the year. He made fairly similar comments ahead of a tough Week 9 matchup, in which he ended up mustering just 51 rushing yards. Ahead of the game, he told reporters, "I'm more worried about us winning football games," Elliott said. "I could care less about individual achievements and stats right now. My main focus right now is just trying to win a football game." As nice as that sounds, one thing that might actually help the Cowboys win more football games would be if, I don't know, their best player played better? Now, in fairness to Zeke, based off his track record so far and all the riffraff that has surrounded the Cowboys this season, and along with the coaching change and the big-time injuries, which included Dak Prescott, perhaps Elliott has earned the benefit of the doubt, at least for the time being. But even so, let's take a look back at this year and see if we can figure out what in the world happened to Ezekiel Elliott. The year actually started off pretty well for number 21. The Cowboys were slotted up against a vaunted Rams defense, and Zeke nearly led the team to a victory as the boys narrowly lost by a score of 20-17. Even with the loss, people in the media were confident that the Cowboys were still a Super Bowl contender, largely because of how good Zeke looked. He rushed for 96 yards at 4.36 yards a pop, and added 31 yards through the air on just 3 receptions. In addition to 127 total yards from scrimmage, he had 2 touchdowns as well, 1 through the air and 1 through the ground. And none of those awful fumbles that would end up plaguing him throughout the year. Even with the loss, things are looking like they're right on schedule for Ezekiel Elliott. And his good fortune continued the next week. For the most part, that is. Because some warning signs did start to show. Week 2 against the Falcons, in a crazy come-from-behind victory, Zeke went just for under 90 yards. But again, made an impact in the passing game, adding 33 yards through the air, and most importantly, in putting points on the board as he punched in another rushing TD. The only problem? He did end up fumbling twice, which is largely uncharacteristic for the Ohio State product. Luckily for the Cowboys, they were able to recover one of them, and ultimately they were able to recover the game, which looked to be lost entirely. But in the coming weeks, Elliott's fortunes started to turn, and he put up some wildly disappointing performances. Outings that we frankly have never seen from Elliott before. 34 rushing yards against the Seahawks week 3. 54 rushing yards against the Browns in week 4. And the following weeks weren't much better. From weeks 5 through week 9, he only topped 65 rushing yards once. And his only 2 100-yard games for the season came later in the year when the season was essentially lost already. I know his season totals were okay, but this is not some run-of-the-mill halfback we're talking about. This is a guy who was on the fast track to being one of the all-time greats. That's why it's so insane that as the season wore on, we started to see the Cowboys' number 2 running back, Tony Pollard, getting more and more action. It would almost be like if the Chiefs started trotting out Chad Henne instead of Patrick Mahomes.
You, Strawberry! Good effort today. I'm putting in a right-handed batter to hit for you.
But I've got 9 home runs today.
You should be very proud of yourself. Sit down, Simpson! You're batting for Strawberry.
Elliott's struggles can be traced back to a couple of sources. Primarily, injuries, both to him and some of his important teammates. In addition to battling hamstring and ankle injuries this year, he also lost his Pro Bowl quarterback Dak Prescott early in the season. And team executive vice president Stephen Jones reiterated the significance of both Zeke and Dak's injuries to the media after a tough loss to Pittsburgh, saying, "With us playing 4 quarterbacks in 5 weeks, their number 1 thoughts are to stop the run because Zeke is such a dynamic player. He gave a gutty performance against Pittsburgh where he wasn't able to practice. Certainly had a little nagging hamstring. He just made some really solid dirty runs, and I think Zeke is a great player, and just like everybody else on this team, has been put in some challenging and tough positions, but he keeps competing." But there is, however, reason for concern beyond just the injuries. It is very possible that the wear and tear of being one of the most heavily used running backs over the past few seasons is starting to catch up with Zeke. During his first 4 seasons, he led the league in carries twice, cracked the 300 mark. A number rarely touched by today's backs 3 times, and would have likely surpassed that in 2017 when he got all the way up to 242 attempts in just 10 games. I know that he is a freak athlete, but at the end of the day, the guy is only human. There's only so much that he can take, and this is something that we've seen before with the traditional bell cow backs, especially in the modern NFL. Larry Johnson with the Chiefs went for back-to-back 1,700-plus rushing yard seasons, totaling an insane 752 carries during the span, and never broke 875 rushing yards in a season again. Another former Cowboy, DeMarco Murray, set the world on fire in 2014 when he carried the ball 392 times, which led the league by a long shot and rushed for 1,845 yards and 13 touchdowns. He would only play 3 more seasons in the league, breaking 705 yards just once. So, if you ask me, it's more than just the injuries that have hurt Elliott this season. It is the attrition that comes along with being one of the most heavily used backs since entering the league. his contract makes him nearly impossible to trade. His 2021 base salary of $9.6 million is fully guaranteed. And if the Cowboys release him, they'll carry $24.5 million in dead money, which means the Cowboys moving on from the overpriced underachiever is unlikely. It's a bit of a catch-22 as well, because if he's on the roster on the 5th day of the 2021 league year, his $12.4 million base salary in 2022 becomes guaranteed. So, effectively, Zeke will be donning the Dallas Star for at least 2 more years. Meaning, the Cowboys faithful better hope that this was a fluky season for their star running back. Otherwise, his albatross of a contract will start to look worse and worse. But what about you? Do you think this is just an off year for Ezekiel Elliott, or is this a sign of his decline? Let us know in the comment section below. If you liked this video and learned a thing or two, clicking the like button helps out a ton. And hey, we appreciate it. If this is your first time coming around to TPS though, subscribing is a great idea, because we put out videos like this every single day. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.